The American dream of a small family. Emily's story began long before hardship found her. In the hopeful days when she and her father, Mr. Chen, first arrived in bustling Los Angeles. Born and raised in a modest city in Southeast Asia, Emily always saw America as a land of open doors and second chances. For both father and daughter, the journey was more than just a move. It was a leap of faith, fueled by dreams they could almost touch. Mr. Chen worked tirelessly, juggling multiple jobs as a restaurant dishwasher and a delivery driver, always returning home well past midnight, but never lacking a hopeful smile. He often reminded Emily, in this country, if you work hard and stay true to yourself, you can build any life you want. Their small, rented apartment wasn't much, but to Emily, every detail, from the creaky fire escape to the skyline visible from her bedroom window, felt like a badge of new beginnings. At school, Emily encountered both curiosity and kindness from her American classmates. With her limited English, the first months were challenging, but her determination set her apart. She spent evenings watching local TV shows to improve her language skills, and weekends helping her father at work so they could save for her future college fund. Community was everything to the Chens. Every Sunday, they joined other immigrant families at a park downtown, sharing food, stories, and laughter. Here, Emily learned about resilience and the mosaic of dreams that every newcomer carried with them. She saw firsthand how different backgrounds and cultures could come together, especially during holiday potlucks and neighborhood festivals. The belief that good things awaited those willing to persevere became the heartbeat of their lives. In quiet moments, Emily would sit by her window, sketching the city lights and scribbling her ambitions in a diary. Become the first in her family to graduate college, make her father proud, and someday help others chasing the same American dream. At its core, the Chen family's journey wasn't about material wealth. It was about forging a sense of belonging, about keeping hope alive despite uncertainty. Their American dream was both fragile and fierce, shaped by sacrifice, courage, and an unbreakable father-daughter bond, one that would teach Emily the meaning of true strength when life took an unexpected turn. Family tragedy. The American dream that Emily and her father had carefully built was shattered in a single, devastating moment. One rainy evening, the world changed forever when Mr. Chen suffered a sudden and fatal heart attack. The grief that swept through their small apartment was profound. Emily had lost her only parent, her guiding star in a foreign land. But Emily's sorrow was quickly overshadowed by the chill of reality. In the days following her father's funeral, the dynamics at home shifted rapidly. Linda, Emily's stepmother, who had once played the part of a supportive partner to Mr. Chen, revealed a colder, calculating side. Almost overnight, she and her two daughters, Emily's half-sisters, assumed control of the family's modest finances and possessions. The warm, if modest home Emily had known no longer felt safe or hers. Legal matters that Emily barely understood unfolded around her. Documents were signed without her say. Family savings, a college fund her father had worked so hard to protect, were redirected. The apartment, already cramped, became a place of secrets and whispered conversations she wasn't meant to hear. Decisions about her schooling, her future, even her daily meals, were now dictated by Linda, who saw Emily less as family and more as an unwelcome burden. What hurt Emily most wasn't losing the physical things her father left behind: his watch, old immigration papers, or the sketchbook she once showed him. It was the emotional distance and isolation. The sisterly bond she had hoped for never formed. Instead, every interaction with her stepsisters was tinged with competition or disdain. At night, Emily heard them laughing in the living room while she sat alone in her room, missing her father's steady voice and gentle reassurance. Social workers and distant relatives appeared briefly, offering polite condolences but no real guidance. The community that had once felt like home suddenly seemed too far away to reach. Emily, barely more than a child herself, was expected to fend for her own place in a household that now treated her as an outsider. Each day, she became more aware that everything she valued, security, love, and her dreams for the future, was at risk. Yet even as grief and injustice pressed down on her, Emily's inner resilience began to surface. She remembered her father's words about perseverance and fairness in America. Somewhere beneath the loneliness, an ember of courage was kindling, one that would ultimately fuel her fight for justice and her place in the world. The dark days. After the funeral, a heavy silence descended upon the Chen household, lingering like an unwelcome shadow. Emily's world, once filled with the gentle rhythm of her father's encouragement, the aroma of his late-night meals, and the laughter drifting up from neighborhood gatherings, felt impossibly cold and unfamiliar. In the wake of Mr. Chen's passing, Linda's transformation was swift and absolute. Gone was the woman who used to share bowls of soup with Emily at the dinner table or ask about her homework with mild politeness. In her place stood a gatekeeper of the family's meager assets, a woman whose voice grew sharper with each day, whose eyes scanned Emily with a growing impatience. Emily's half-sisters followed Linda's example. What could have been a source of comfort, sibling solidarity in the face of loss, became an emotional minefield. The sisters, emboldened by their mother's authority, took possession of common spaces. The living room, once a gathering, point for TV nights, and quiet study, was now their private domain. Emily's presence was unwelcome. Her footsteps met with rolled eyes or whispered exchanges she pretended not to overhear. She retreated more and more into the small room she shared with memories of her father, her sanctuary slipping away each day, stripped of belongings and dreams. One of the cruelties Emily faced in those days was the gradual stripping away of everything that connected her to her father. His watch, with the scuffed leather strap and faded engraving, vanished from her nightstand. The family photo albums, her only links to her childhood in Asia, were boxed away and shelved in a locked cabinet for safekeeping. Even her own sketchbooks, carefully filled with drawings and dreams, were pushed to the back of a dusty closet to make room for her stepsister's clutter. When she tried to protest, asking about her father's wish that she go to college, Linda dismissed her firmly. "Everyone needs to contribute now," she said. "You'll finish high school, but college is a luxury we can't afford. We need that space for important things." The college fund her father had spoken of, the modest account he steadily contributed to every month, was gone, transferred elsewhere, spent, or simply made to disappear. Her days grew monotonous. Before dawn, she would rise to the sound of Linda banging cupboards, or the half-sisters arguing over a shared hairdryer. After quickly cleaning herself up, often rushing to avoid their disdain, Emily made coffee and packed lunches. She swept the kitchen, washed dishes left from the night before, and folded laundry, all before catching the bus to school. School, a battlefield and a refuge. School offered little relief. With her home life spiraling, Emily found it hard to concentrate, her grades slipping despite her every effort. The
Look at this bok
teachers,
choy, madam.
noticing her
Picked just
withdrawal,
this morning, still
sometimes
covered in
asked
dew.
if she needed
It looks
help,
wonderful. I'll
but
take
she
2
was too
pounds.
proud or too wary to let anyone in. She avoided questions about her family, inventing excuses for missed assignments or the growing shadows beneath her eyes. Yet, school also became her quiet battlefield. She clung to routine, reading in the library during lunch, practicing English in the speech lab, volunteering to tutor freshmen whenever she could. There were moments of solace, a kind word from her chemistry teacher, a shared joke with the girl who sat across from her in math. Sometimes she would stay late on campus, lingering in the empty halls just to postpone her return to the apartment that no longer felt like home. Hidden chores and quiet resistance. After school, Emily's responsibilities multiplied. Linda devised a rigid chore chart, though the only name that ever seemed to fill the page was Emily's. She vacuumed, scrubbed the bathroom, and cooked dinner every evening, serving the 3 others before eating alone at the far end of the table. When the stepsisters complained about the food or left dirty dishes behind, Linda only glared at Emily to clean up the mess. Often, her half-sisters would borrow or steal her few possessions. A scarf from her aunt in China, her favorite notebook, even the cheap headphones she saved up for. Each small theft stung, but Emily masked her pain, learning to let go of material things and count only on herself. At night, she lay curled under a thin blanket, listening to the laughter and TV sounds coming from the living room. Some nights, she wept quietly, clutching a single photograph of her and her father at a city park, the ink already fading from being handled so often. Isolation and the erosion of hope.
Emily,
Perhaps worst
you
of
must
all
trust your
was the
instincts on this.
isolation. The
truth
Chen's
often
old
hides in
Sunday
the smallest
gatherings
details.
with other immigrant families had disappeared. Linda and the half-sisters showed little interest in community events. Emily felt their absence
gently,
like a
just
physical
this.
ache.
See how the paint
Even
goes
when
on
she
smoothly?
glimpsed neighbors in passing,
Yes,
other Asian
that's
families,
perfect.
the kind
Freshly
janitor
steamed
who once
buns.
gave her apples
Get your
after
skewers
school,
right here.
she
Hurry up.
shrank away, ashamed to share her troubles or admit that her once bright future was dimming. Playful invitations from classmates went declined. She feared that if she left the apartment, Linda would call and demand she hurry home for some invented task. Or worse, use her absence as further excuse to criticize her.
This is the best
She
drawing
stopped
you've
sketching.
ever done. I love
The
it.
act, feeling too indulgent, the visions of her future too painful to imagine. Endurance and tiny acts of defiance. Still, a stubborn core within Emily refused to disappear. She recorded her chores on slips of paper, tucking them behind her mattress, a quiet ledger of the work she did, perhaps useful one day. She kept copies of her academic transcripts, letters of recommendation, and her father's small wallet in a sandwich bag hidden inside an old shoebox. She read books about civil rights and famous Americans who had overcome adversity, underlining passages late at night by the weak glow of a borrowed flashlight. Sometimes, when no one
You really
watched,
thought you could hide the
she
cookies,
scribbled
didn't you?
in an old journal from her father. One day, things will be
almost
different.
got away with it,
Don't
too.
forget who you are. These small actions, petty, some might say, powerless, others would judge, were the seeds of self-preservation. On a particularly difficult evening, Linda berated Emily over a misplaced bill, hurling accusations about irresponsibility and ingratitude. After Linda left, Emily stood before the mirror, fighting back tears, and whispered, "I belong here. I matter." It was a fragile affirmation, but each repetition made her a little stronger. The glimmer of resilience. Through the endless days of chores, the sting of rejection, and the ache of lost memories, something hard and bright began to form within Emily. A resolve not to let her father's dreams
It's
or her
finally
own
over, Emily.
die quietly
You're
in
safe
that
now.
apartment.
All right,
She
everyone,
listened
look at how
to the
artist
encouragement
used
of
these
mentors
colors.
from her old community in the
Wow,
back of her
it's so
memory.
big. I love
She
the blue
replayed her
ones.
father's simple, kind words. Work hard. Be proud. No one can take that from you. Whenever she felt hopeless, she found purpose in routine. Studying, helping classmates, returning the library books on time, writing little goals to keep herself anchored. With each small triumph, Emily built a private foundation of hope, the first stones in what would become her fight for freedom and dignity. These were not just dark days. They were the slow forging of resilience, the quiet part of the story when no one is watching, when a person's true character is shaped, unbeknownst to Linda and her stepsisters. While they tried to erase her father's legacy and break her spirit, Emily was learning that the most steadfast dreams are the ones that survive the longest nights. Exposing the truth, it began as a quiet defiance, a whisper of rebellion in the stillness of Emily's isolated world. For months, she had endured the accumulation of little injustices, possessions missing, dreams stolen, her every effort disregarded, and her future seemingly erased. But as the days blurred together, something inside Emily stubbornly refused to submit to despair. Between the monotony of chores and the weight of unfairness, a plan gradually took root, fragile yet persistent. Emily realized that silence was her enemy. The only way to reclaim her life was to expose the truth. No matter the risk, no matter how alone she felt. Collecting evidence, secrets in the shadows. Emily's first step was to become observant, not just of what was taken from her, but of the everyday dealings within the apartment. She listened intently from behind closed doors, piecing together whispered conversations between Linda and her half-sisters. Sometimes, Mr. Chen's name would come up in hushed tones as they discussed reallocating funds. Other times, they'd argue about the paperwork Linda kept locked away in the bottom drawer of her bedroom desk. Emily made mental notes. Then, late at night, scribbled down fragments in her battered journal. Bank statements missing, emails erased, cash envelopes shuffled and hidden. The apartment itself became a map of secrets. Emily learned to move quietly, rifling through discarded papers in the recycling bin, scanning for signatures or official stamps.
Let's get this over
She was meticulous, using her phone's camera to snap pictures of anything suspicious, account numbers, letters addressed to her late father from banks or government agencies, receipts that didn't seem to match any purchases she'd witnessed. She also watched Linda's behavior outside the home. Twice, she followed Linda discreetly on the pretense of running errands, noting visits to the bank, and overheard fragments of anxious conversations in waiting areas. Emily soon realized that Linda was more than careless. She was arrogant, assuming her control over Emily meant no one would ever question her actions. Documenting injustice, there was power in turning painful moments into data. Emily made a habit of writing down every instance of mistreatment. The nights she wasn't allowed to eat dinner with the family, the chore chart that only listed her name, the times her stepsisters took her clothes or personal belongings and refused to return them. She kept a record of missing school supplies, emails from teachers about her academic progress, anything that painted a full picture of her life under Linda's rule. Emily soon filled several notebooks with dates, times, and details. She sketched diagrams showing how her father's study, a space he dedicated to her education, had been ransacked for personal documents. She mapped out the timeline of when her college fund disappeared and cross-referenced it with odd deposits into Linda's bank account. These records became more than evidence. They were a lifeline and a testament to Emily's resolve. Finding allies in unlikely places, Emily knew she couldn't do it alone forever. Mustering tremendous courage, she reached out to people she thought might listen, cautiously at first, testing for safety in the act of sharing her story. Her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Parker, noticed Emily's frequent library visits in long afternoons, lingering on campus. One rainy evening, after noticing the bruised sadness in Emily's eyes, she gently asked if everything was all right at home. For the first time, Emily considered the possibility of trust. After a long pause, she offered a guarded answer. "Things aren't great." Mrs. Parker promised to listen, no matter how long it took.
Thank you, Mrs.
It wasn't just
Jenkins.
staff who
It
became
smells
allies.
absolutely
A classmate,
divine.
Hannah, a Vietnamese-American girl who'd also lost her mother at a young age, picked up on subtle cues. How Emily always wore the same sweater, or how she always volunteered for after-school tutoring until late, avoiding going home. Eventually, over shared sandwiches in the library, Emily confided a little more. Hannah, without judgment, offered both empathy and practical ideas. "You have to keep records. And if you ever need to talk to my aunt, she works at a legal aid center. Just say the word." Together, they began to strategize. Hannah helped Emily organize her evidence, showing her how to scan and store documents on encrypted cloud folders, so nothing could be seized or erased at home. Mrs. Parker connected her with a student advocate who explained Emily's rights as a minor and an heir, and began preparing her for the possibility of legal action. Building the case, stealth and savvy. As weeks slipped by, Emily moved with greater confidence. Pretending compliance at home, she continued to gather and categorize documents. She kept her composure around Linda and her stepsisters, allowing them to underestimate her. But beneath her obedient shell, she was quietly relentless. She copied lease agreements, captured images of withdrawals from the college account, and even managed to recover a deleted voicemail from her father's lawyer, one that confirmed Mr. Chen had left explicit instructions for his daughter's future. Emily learned the legal language from pamphlets Mrs. Parker lent her, reading up on concepts like emancipation, guardianship disputes, and inheritance rights. It was difficult, often confusing, but every word she understood gave her strength. She started reaching out to nonprofit organizations that supported children in foster care or involved in family legal cases, asking for advice in anonymous online forums. Each answer built her confidence. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't powerless. The turning point, readying for confrontation. Eventually, Emily realized she had enough to take action. The weight of months of documentation, the emotional exhaustion, the anxiety of being found out, all clarified into a singular purpose. She met with the legal aid volunteer, provided by Hannah's aunt, who reviewed her records and assured Emily her case was both serious and winnable. With professional help, they began drafting a petition for formal investigation into the missing funds and Linda's misuse of guardianship. Meanwhile, word spread quietly among trusted adults at school and in the community. Emily was no longer just the quiet girl with the sad eyes. She was a survivor with a purpose, and her courage moved others to help. Teachers wrote character references. Friends provided emotional support. A few community elders offered to testify about Mr. Chen's intentions for his daughter in the years he'd spent sacrificing for her future. Emily found strength in each gesture of kindness. Each shared word of encouragement reinforced her resolve that what she was doing wasn't simply about money, but justice and dignity for herself, for her father's memory, and for all kids who might otherwise suffer in silence. The calm before the storm. As the
Here is
day
your order.
approached for
That will
Emily
be
to reveal her
$6.50.
findings in
Thank you.
court,
Have a nice day.
home
You too.
life grew tense, with unspoken suspicion. Linda was snappier, quick to anger, and less careful with Emily's presence in the room. The half-sisters whispered more, but Emily kept her head down, her nerves concealed behind busy hands. At night, when anxiety made sleep impossible, Emily reviewed her files, rehearsed her statements, and reminded herself of what was at stake. In those hours, she wrote letters to her future self. I am not what they think I am. I am my father's daughter.
Hello.
And this is my fight. She clung to the belief that right would prevail over might, and that beneath the surface of her suffering, she had grown smart, resourceful, and brave. The plan was in motion. The truth finally had a chance to be seen and heard. Facing the law and the community, the courthouse was an imposing building of glass and stone. But on the morning of Emily's hearing, it seemed to glow with a possibility she'd almost forgotten. For weeks, tension had mounted at home, every step and sigh laced with suspicion. Linda paced their apartment anxiously, snapping at her daughters and shooting icy glances at Emily whenever she caught her in the hallway. The house felt smaller than ever,
It's okay, sweetie.
heavy,
Don't cry.
with secrets
Now you
so
put your
close
shoes
to
on right
bursting.
now. We are already
Emily,
late.
in contrast, found an unlikely calm growing within her as the date approached. She had done all she could, documenting, organizing, and finally, trusting the strength of her own voice. She had packed every scrap of evidence into a battered messenger
You
bag.
need to stay away from
The
him.
bank statements, the
I mean it.
photographs,
Do you hear me?
the detailed
Stay
journals,
away or I will make
and
you
copies
regret.
of voicemails from her father's
see what
attorney.
she's wearing?
At night,
Completely
she rehearsed her
inappropriate. The
story
children
before
are
the
right
mirror,
there.
remembering to look people in the eye and speak with her chin held high. When the day finally arrived, Mrs. Parker, her school counselor, drove her downtown. Hannah was there too, along with her aunt, the legal aid attorney, who had taken Emily's case pro bono. As they walked into the courthouse together, Emily saw a small group of teachers and neighbors standing outside for support. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. The courtroom,
Everything happens for a
nerves,
reason, you know?
and testimony inside.
Just try to keep your chin
The
up.
courtroom buzzed with quiet activity. Attorneys sorting files, a stern-faced judge preparing case notes, distant relatives murmuring in the gallery. Emily found herself seated across from Linda and her stepsisters, who said nothing but radiated an air of disbelief and resentment. Linda had hired her own lawyer, a man in an expensive suit, who kept shuffling through paperwork and whispering in urgent, clipped tones. The proceedings began with formalities,
Did you hear what happened
case
at Al
numbers,
Watson's house last
official
night?
names, reading of the charges.
Are you
Emily's
serious?
legal
I thought it
advocate
was just
laid
a
out the
small
petition
argument.
carefully. Misuse of guardianship,
I'm so
financial
sorry.
exploitation,
Sorry.
and the deprivation of inheritance. While the weight of legal terms threatened to overwhelm her, Emily focused on rehearsed breathing and the reminders scribbled in her notebook. Tell the truth.
Do you think he's
Stay
coming back?
steady. You are not alone. Called to the stand, Emily's heart pounded, but her voice, though small at first, gained confidence as she began. She described her father's dreams and sacrifices, the promises about her college fund, the abrupt change in home life once Linda took control. When asked, she presented her evidence: copies of transfers from joint bank accounts, diaries marking the day, treasured belongings disappeared, a timeline of her withdrawal and Linda's behavior. The opposing attorney attempted to discredit her. He asked if she was simply resentful or making things up for attention. Emily did not waver. You do not need to be perfect to deserve fairness, she answered quietly, but with clarity. I just want what my father intended for me, and I want to stop this from happening to anyone else. Mrs. Parker testified. as did Hannah's aunt. Even a school principal spoke of Emily's character and the abrupt change in her academic performance after her father's passing. The community's presence, immigrant families, a neighbor from their old Sunday gatherings, teachers lining the back, lent gravity Emily could feel deep inside. Their nods and gentle smiles when she looked up reminded her this was about more than money.
It's okay,
It
sweetie,
was
you're
about
all right.
dignity
Just breathe.
and truth.
Now put your
Linda's
shoes on.
defense
We are late. I
and the
told you
tension
already.
of
Grab your
truth.
backpack. Let's
When
go.
it was Linda's turn to respond, her strategy shifted between denial and self-pity. She told the judge she'd worked hard to provide for everyone, that Emily misunderstood, that family matters were messy and complicated. Her daughters echoed her, testifying that Emily was withdrawn, that she'd chosen isolation, that the household's chaos wasn't so one-sided. But facts, supported by meticulous documentation, were hard to ignore. The judge questioned Linda about the vanished college fund, inconsistencies in expense reports, and her unilateral decisions. A sense of discomfort settled over the defense table as it became increasingly clear the narrative was not as innocent as Linda portrayed. Verdict and its aftermath. After a tense pause for deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. He declared Linda had, in fact, violated her duties as guardian. She'd diverted funds meant for Emily, failed to uphold the late Mr. Chen's wishes, and created a hostile environment for his daughter. The court ordered restitution of the college account, a formal censure, and a reassignment of Emily's guardianship to a court-approved relative until she turned 18. For Emily, the words landed like sunlight, piercing a stormy sky. She cried, not just from relief, but from the immense release of fear and self-doubt that had accumulated over so many silent nights, facing the community's gaze. If going to court had been daunting, facing the community afterward was a different kind of vulnerable. News of the case spread quickly among local immigrant circles. And at her high school, some people whispered, others offered shy congratulations. At first, Emily dreaded being the subject of gossip. Yet slowly, something extraordinary unfolded. Classmates she barely knew began reaching out with notes of empathy. Parents from the old Sunday park outings called with offers of help or words of pride. Mrs. Parker encouraged Emily to speak at a school assembly, turning her struggle into a message of courage for others experiencing hardship. Emily, trembling at the podium, spoke not just about betrayal and loss, but about the importance of asking for help, trusting the system, and holding on to hope, even if every door seems locked. Her words resonated far beyond anything she expected. Newfound confidence and acceptance. The court's verdict changed more than Emily's legal and financial standing. It shifted her sense of self. Community elders now asked her opinion about supporting other children in distress. Local advocacy groups reached out for her story. Teachers who once saw her only as a quiet, overworked student now treated her with renewed respect. Her half-sisters and Linda faded to the background. The power they once held over her life diminished. By justice served, Emily could breathe again, the future opening before her, like the Los Angeles skyline she had once drawn through her apartment window. She kept a copy of the court's decision in her backpack, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what it meant to stand up for herself, emerging with purpose. Emily's journey through the legal system became more than just a family dispute. It was an awakening. She realized that fighting for her rights was not only her father's legacy, but the first chapter of a new life. Each day, as she walked to school without fear, waves of gratitude and cautious optimism mingled within her. She understood now that the American dream was never just about opportunity, but about the courage to claim a place and the humility to lift others as you rise. Affirming one's self, surviving the ordeal with her stepmother, and winning legal protection marked an end to one ordeal for Emily. But it also opened a new and daunting era of self-discovery. The courthouse victory, though public and celebrated by many, did not instantly rewrite the years of grief, fear, and self-doubt that had quietly shaped her adolescence. Instead, it gave her permission to examine her true strengths, ambitions, and the unique legacy her father had entrusted to her. The first weeks in her new guardianship home felt strange. Emily was placed under the care of a distant relative, a gentle, elderly aunt who respected her privacy and independence. The apartment was smaller, but filled with warmth, a kitchen that always smelled like ginger and green tea, faded photographs of their family back in the home country, and stacks of books on every available surface. It was a peaceful space, one where Emily could finally unpack not just her few physical belongings, but the emotional burdens she had carried in silence for years. A new rhythm of life, no longer shouldering daily household duties for an ungrateful family, Emily poured herself into her studies. Early mornings found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by test prep materials, scholarships applications, and lined notebooks where she would scribble goals and motivational quotes she'd collected from library books. Academic achievement became a form of self-assertion. Excelling in her classes was a way to honor both her father's memory and the sacrifices they had made together. She approached her teachers for extra assignments and participated in community college dual enrollment courses to gain an edge for university applications. Her old guidance counselor remained a guiding presence, helping Emily prepare for interviews, edit her personal statements, and navigate the labyrinthine world of financial aid. Each A on a paper or praise from a mentor built her confidence anew, rediscovering connection. For the first time since her father's passing, Emily allowed herself to nurture friendships. Hannah remained a close confidant, but Emily branched out, joining clubs devoted to art, debate, and even volunteering at the local children's library. By helping other young immigrants with homework and translation, Emily began to see her struggles not only as sources of pain, but as reservoirs of understanding and empathy. During art club meetings, she rediscovered a love for sketching and painting, talents she'd once hidden for fear of ridicule or theft at home. Her portraits captured not only the faces of classmates, but also the invisible emotions that lurked beneath, a frown of worry, the glimmer of hope, or the quiet solidarity shared among those who had weathered loss. Encouraged by a teacher, she submitted one of her pieces to a citywide high school art show. The award she received was less important than the courage it took to sign her name, publicly and unapologetically, on her own work. Healing and forgiveness, yet the path of self-affirmation was not without obstacles. Emily grappled with guilt for trusting people again, and sometimes the familiar ache of abandonment returned on sleepless nights. She worked through her emotions in therapy sessions arranged by her school, where, for the first time, she voiced fears and anger she had always bottled up. These sessions helped her recognize that affirming herself did not mean erasing the pain of her past, but accepting it as part of her story. One of the hardest steps was letting go of her resentment toward Linda and her half-sisters. Emily began to understand that holding on to old bitterness would only chain her to the life she had worked so hard to escape. Forgiveness, she realized, through many tearful conversations with her aunt and counselors, was an act of agency, not a gift to them, but a liberation for herself. She wrote letters she never mailed, to Linda, to her father, to the girl she used to be. In these letters, she poured out memories, good and bad, and often ended them with lines like, "You hurt me, but you can't define me anymore." Or, "Dad, I hope you see I am not giving up." Closing the notebook, she felt lighter, more present, more resolved, pursuing dreams for herself and others. With her emotional world healing, Emily's sights turned to the future. The dream of higher education that once seemed unreachable now became a beacon. She researched scholarships aimed at first-generation immigrants and children facing hardship. Her essays told her real story, no longer the sanitized version she used to recite when asked about her family, but the honest truth of adversity, perseverance, and the hope that sustained her throughout. Colleges began to respond, some with offers, all with encouragement. Each acceptance letter was a tangible validation that her experiences, far from being liabilities, were evidence of strength and character. But Emily's ambitions extended beyond personal success. She volunteered at local advocacy groups, helping other teens navigate social services or gather documentation for college applications. She found purpose in speaking at school events, church gatherings, and even immigrant support organizations. Her words were raw, laced with honesty about grief and injustice, but always ending in encouragement. "You are not invisible. Your voice matters." She became a mentor, a living counterpoint to the silence and invisibility she had once endured. Parents in the local community sought her advice for their children, asking about scholarships or how to develop resilience in the face of xenophobia. What started as a quiet personal journey evolved into ripples of change. As Emily joined panels discussing youth empowerment and wrote op-eds for the high school newsletter detailing her journey from surviving to thriving, celebrating identity. As graduation approached, Emily felt a growing pride in her dual heritage. She joined a multicultural club and helped organize a festival celebrating foods, customs, and the stories of immigrant youth. For the first time, she cooked her father's favorite recipe for a public gathering, sharing with her peers the flavors and stories of her origin country. The applause and genuine appreciation from her classmates made her realize that her background, once a source of alienation, was a wellspring of community and connection. Emily also rekindled the rituals she and her father had shared, lighting incense in his memory on special days, keeping a picture of them near her study desk as a source of comfort and inspiration. She didn't shy away from her past, but used it as fertile ground to root her future. The new American dream. In the months before college, Emily took time to reflect. She recognized that affirming herself wasn't a single act or accomplishment, but an ongoing journey, a daily choice to walk in the world with courage, dignity, and generosity. With a scholarship letter in one hand and her battered sketchbook in the other, she stood at the threshold of adulthood, ready for the challenges and joys yet to come. Her story, once defined by hardship, had become a beacon for others, proof that resilience, hope, and integrity could prevail against even the deepest dark. Looking in the mirror, Emily finally saw not the burdened child of yesterday, but a young woman worthy of every dream she dared to chase. New beginnings, with the court's verdict behind her and high school graduation in sight. Emily stood at a juncture she never could have imagined, even a year earlier. Gone were the days of quiet endurance, those dark hours spent washing dishes alone or shrinking in the shadow of her stepmother's anger. Now, a different kind of uncertainty filled the air, the anticipation of a life she could finally shape for herself, a place of her own. After moving out of her aunt's apartment, Emily rented a modest studio near her chosen college, using a combination of the restored college fund, scholarships, and a part-time job at the campus library. Her new home was small but sunlit, with hardwood floors and a view of city rooftops. She decorated it in colors that reminded her of her childhood: soft yellows and blues, a clay pot of lucky bamboo by the window, and prints of her own artwork hung proudly on the wall. For the first time in years, every object in Emily's living space belonged to her, chosen by her alone. She learned to cook for herself, simple meals, often a blend of American and Asian favorites. Each meal tasted of freedom and memory, and she would sometimes pause in the evening, stirring a pot of congee or folding dumplings, feeling the presence of her father in the gentle act of nourishing herself. Academic independence and Growth College was a world of opportunity and challenge. On her first day, stepping onto campus among thousands of other new students, Emily felt electricity in the air, a sense of possibility that made her both nervous and exhilarated. She enrolled in courses she'd always dreamed of: literature, sociology, studio art. For the first time, class discussions felt like stepping into a new language, one where her voice mattered and her opinions shaped the dialogue. The academic workload was demanding, especially as Emily continued her job in the library. There were late nights spent cross-referencing sources for research papers, mornings cataloging books before the sun rose, and countless hours in the studio fine-tuning her art. Mistakes came too: a failed midterm, a project deadline missed when her schedule grew overwhelming. But each setback was met with resilience she had long practiced. Emily learned to ask for help, to form study groups, to reach out to professors during office hours, and to lean on the campus support services she'd once been too shy to approach. Slowly, success began to feel less accidental and more like the deserved result of her hard work and determination. Building community and giving back. Not long after settling in, Emily sought out groups on campus that echoed the warmth of the community she had lost. She joined the Asian American Student Association, finding comfort in familiar stories of migration, cultural fusion, and family complexities. The club's mentors, older students who had once walked in her shoes, offered support with everything from navigating cultural expectations to understanding the intricacies of financial aid. But Emily's role was never just that of a receiver. She volunteered as an orientation leader for international students, greeting newcomers with warmth and practical advice. She led workshops on scholarship writing, quietly mentoring others who, like her, faced uphill battles most of their peers would never understand. Most moving for Emily were the evenings spent at a local community center, tutoring children from immigrant families. Patiently, she explained math, word problems, and helped translate school notices for bewildered parents. Each interaction reminded her of a time when she, too, felt voiceless. And now, she was the one making space for others to speak. Friendship, trust, and new relationships. As college terms passed, Emily's circle of friends widened. She grew close to her roommate, a fellow first-generation student who shared both the pressure of parental sacrifice and the joys of new American traditions. They exchanged family recipes and stories, studying late into the night and dancing together at campus festivals. For the first time since tragedy had upended her life, Emily allowed herself to trust others deeply and be vulnerable. She told her friends about her father and the hardships she'd endured, not from a place of brokenness, but as a testament to growth. The responses she received were not pity, but admiration and support. In her sophomore year, Emily found herself drawn to appear in her art history seminar. A gentle, thoughtful architecture student who valued her opinion and made her laugh. Their tentative connection blossomed over long walks and shared sketchbooks, reinforcing Emily's belief that love, too, could find her in this new chapter of life. Embracing identity and rooted optimism, navigating life on her own, Emily became increasingly proud of her dual heritage. At multicultural events and in her art projects, she fused elements of her Southeast Asian upbringing with her American experience. Her senior art thesis, a series of layered, mixed-media pieces, explored migration, language, and the ties between old and new worlds. The exhibit drew attention from professors and visiting artists, with some pieces even displaying in local galleries. Emily celebrated her culture without shame or apology. Festivals became opportunities to share food and stories. She taught friends how to fold paper lanterns and wrote essays on the meaning of home. Even moments of cultural misunderstanding on campus became occasions for dialogue and mutual learning, honoring the past, welcoming the future. Though Emily's life brimmed with newfound independence, she never forgot the journey that had brought her here. She kept her father's photograph on her study desk, lighting incense on his birthday, and reflecting on how each challenge had molded her resilience. Letters from her aunt and old friends sometimes arrived, filled with pride and encouragement. On breaks, she would return to visit her aunt, cook familiar dishes, and reconnect with the community of elders who had once watched over her from a distance. Each rite became a ritual of healing and affirmation. Emily discovered that moving forward did not mean erasing the pain or leaving memories behind. It meant carrying them with gratitude and renewed strength. A vision for what comes next. As graduation approached, Emily contemplated her next steps. Offers from graduate programs and nonprofit fellowships arrived. She debated between pursuing a master's in social work, dedicated to helping families like her own, or an MFA to deepen her exploration of art and identity. No longer did choices feel imposed or desperate. Emily knew she could shape her future, backed by a legacy of endurance and guided by a sense of responsibility to others. She applied for, and was awarded, a grant to launch a creative mentorship program connecting immigrant youth with local artists. The project, which began as weekly art workshops, soon attracted volunteers and media attention, with children displaying their work in a jubilant community exhibition. Carrying the dream forward, standing on the terrace at her graduation, overlooking the city skyline, bathed in the golden dusk, Emily felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and hope. Her journey from a crowded apartment to this moment had been fraught with heartbreak, uncertainty, and loss, but also with triumph, wisdom, and the bonds of community she had rebuilt for herself and others. Emily understood now that new beginnings did not erase the past. They honored it, the freedom to pursue her dreams, help others, and claim her space in the world was the inheritance her father had hoped to give. And now, with a steady heart, she welcomed the challenges and joys of the path that stretched before her, a life defined not by what she had survived, but by what she would build.